Yes, good morning, students. Welcome back to the sessions of database application with Windows Home application. Let us revise the yesterday's application before moving on to the today's task, right? So yesterday what we did is we just went through the common controls of this particular Windows Home application. We tried to design some GUI. Let's take of student registration form. Let us say we added enrollment number, student name, semester with the combo box, email ID is a text box, date of birth is the date time picker, and gender as a radio buttons. And what we did is we wanted to submit all this data to our database once we click on this particular button. So for that, what we did is we went to Solution Explorer and we added one database. Based on the database, we created a table called student. Then we created a design of that particular student database like ID as a primary key and auto incremented, enrollment number, name, semester, email, mobile, DOB, gender, and these are the data types. Right? Now based on this, we created a backend code in which the first two namespaces were included in this. Then we established a connection string using the properties of this particular database using the connection string option, and we pasted between these two double quotes. We also remember that what if we have other double quotes between this connection string, we remove that and we make sure that our connection string is of red color. Then on button click event, we first found that which radio button was checked, and based on that we stored male, female, or no selection. Later on, we created an insert query where we return insert into table name, values, and based on your sequence of this table, except this ID, we entered the values that has been entered in this particular text box and the controls, right? And then we created a SQL connection class and we passed our connection string here. Then we created a command class. We passed our query as well as the connection. Now command class is mainly used to execute your query. To execute the query, we use the try catch block, connection.open, execute this query. If the query is executed properly, provide a message box of success and close the connection. But if there is any error in this query, we go to catch, we provide a message called error and we close the connection to stop the overloaded overload on this particular server of your database, right? So moving on next, continuing with this particular database only, what is my next task is you just read out this task. We want to create one GUI in which we have one combo box. That combo box contains all the enrollment numbers of the students that we are going to fetch from the database, right? So this is the first task that I'm highlighting right now. We need to generate one combo box that will fetch all the enrollment numbers of the students from the database. Once that we have done, what we want to do is we write a code such that it fetches all the values like the name of the student, enrollment of the student, email, mobile, gender, semester, and birth date of the student, of which student whose enrollment number is selected in that particular combo box. And we want to display all the values in a different text box, right? And again, one condition is that the text box are non-editable. That means whatever values that we are fetching from the database and displaying in the text box, those values are non-editable, right? So what we will do is we will first go with the first part. This we are going to generate one combo box, and that combo box will have a enrollment numbers fetched from the database. So let's move on to your software. We go to Solution Explorer, right click on your project name, add new item, and we select a Windows form. Let us say its name is form2.cs. click on OK. So you got the form 2. Excuse me. Right. So what we want to have is a combo box. So we'll go to toolbox, click on a label, drag and drop here. I'm just renaming this text as select enrollment number, and I will put a combo box below it, or let us say here. Right. Now, as we save, what we have written is we need to fetch the data for this combo box from the database, and the data will be the enrollment number of the students. Right. So here, statically, we are not going to add any of the data here. We'll keep this pane empty. Right. So I'm clicking on the cancel. So what we want to do is we want to fetch the data. So let us go to the design data part. So what I want to do is I need to fetch these enrollment numbers and display these enrollment numbers in our combo box. Sorry, design number 2. Design number 2. Right. So let us say I am trying to execute one query here. That query will be like, let us say, new query, and I will write a query like select enroll from student table. Try to execute this query. Right. So what we have fetched is we have fetched only one column and we have 6 different rows. We have fetched only one column and we have 6 different rows. So this output must be merged to this combo box. And this should be done whenever your form is executed first. That means whenever your form has been loaded. That means we are going to write the code for it in this particular event called form2 underscore load. It means whenever this form is executed, we are going to fetch the data from the database and fill it in our combo box. So for this, again, we are going to import two namespaces, that is using system.data.sql and using system.data.sql client. Next thing, we need to establish a connection string. So string s equals to @ and copy a connection string from properties of database. Control C, Control V here. As you can see, my complete string is of red color, so there is no double quotes between the connection string, in between the connection string. Right. So now here we are going to start with our coding. So first I will create one query, that is string sel equals to. I'm going to write the same query as written here. Select enrollment from student, because we are only dealing with the enrollment, because we want to fetch enrollment number and display it in the combo box. So I will write select enroll from student. So this is the query that I want to execute. Now to execute the query, I will require one controlled or class called data table, and I will take data table equals to new data table. Now what is data table? A data table is a virtual table which will be containing rows and columns. So whatsoever output this query will be giving me, that will be stored in this type of virtual table, which will have rows and columns as per your query. So data table will be virtual table that will be created as per the requirement, and see, form to load didn't come automatic. It came automatically. Just you need to double click on your form, so it will automatically be here. You will be in the form 2 underscore load event. Right. So data table is a virtual table, again I'm repeating, which will have rows and columns. So now to execute the select query, we will use SQL data adapter DA equals to new SQL data adapter. And this SQL data adapter will have two parameters. One is your query, that is SEL, and second will be your connection string, that where you want to execute this query. So we have said that we want to execute on this particular database. So SQL data adapter DA equals to new SQL data adapter. You fire your query, provide your query actually, and provide your connection string. Next, once this query is executed, all the data will be contained in this particular object, and this object needs to be filled in this particular table. So I will write da.fill dt. So what it does, whatsoever data this query has fetched and stored in this object, we are filling all those data in our virtual data table that will have such type of scenario. That is one column and 6 different rows. Is this clear till now? Right? Okay, so moving on ahead. Now, what is our task? We need to fill all this data into our combo box. And as we know, this query is returning multiple rows. So we have row 1 as some value, row 2 as some value, row 3 is having some value. Likewise, row 5, 4, 5 and 6 is having some different values. Now to store all this value one by one in our combo box, we are going to use for loop. So I will write if dt.rows dot count is greater than 0. That means if my data table contains any rows, then and then execute this part. Otherwise, we are not concerned with any type of pure data, right? So here for integer I equals to 0, I less than dt.rows.count I plus plus. Now here I stands for your row count. That means whenever I is going to get execute, it will be first here, your I index will be here, then I is incremented, your pointer will move to this row. Once again the I is incremented, it will move to this particular index. Likewise, it will move to the last index. At last, once your row count is over, it will stop. It will stop the execution of for loop. So I represents here your row. And as we can see, we have only one column, that will be column index 0. Because we have only one column, it will be 0 index. If we have two columns, index start with 0, 1, likewise. So for I integer I equals to 0, I less than dt.rows.count I plus plus. What want to do? We want to do is we want to add the data of the data table to combo box 1. So combo box 1 dot items dot add. What we want to add? We want to add the data of this data table that contains 6 different rows and one column. So rows index starts with 0, that is I, and column index is by default 0 because only one column is there. So form 2 again. So we will write dt.rows and two square brackets. The first square bracket will require the index of your row. Our row index is I, so we'll put I, and second we'll have the column index. Our column index is always by default 0 because we're containing only one particular column. So dt.rows.I of 0. So this is what it will work. I equals to 0, so it will move to this 0th index. And then what we have said is 0th column. So 0th row and 0th column value, add it in your combo box 1. Again, I loop will execute one more time. Index will be incremented, so it will move here. Again, I index and that column's value, add it to combo box. Likewise, it will add all these values. So let us try to execute this form. Now, remember one thing, whenever you are having multiple forms in your particular Windows Form application, and if you want to execute any one form of them, of it, we need to go to Solution Explorer. You can see program.cs file. In that, you need to say which form you want to execute. By default, it's form 1, that is yesterday's form. So I'm changing it to form 2 now. And let us try to execute. As we said, on form load, execute this query, fill up the data in data table, and all those data of the data table we need to fill up in our combo box. Let's see whether it is being added to our combo box or not. So let us see. Yes. So all the enrollment numbers has been included in our combo box. Clear with this? So what we have done is we have completed the first part of our exercise. That is adding all the enrollment numbers from the database to our combo box. Clear with this? Any questions? Raise it now. If there is any question, raise it now. Or we can move ahead with the next part of the exercise. I will provide you the content of today as well as yesterday in your e-content. Don't worry. Yes, Jit, can you just explain your question properly? Connection O2 form means? See, there is a provision in your Windows Phone application that you can provide a connection string at one place, that we call it as a class file, and we always use that connection string wherever it is required. But right now I'm not going in that part. I will use the connection string individually wherever I'm creating the different forms. Yes, it is a disconnected way of database connectivity. Shall we move on? Yes or no? Any one of you just give me answer. Okay, so we are moving on to next part. That is, the next part is we need to fetch all the details from the database of of the enrollment number which is being selected in this particular combo box. Let us say if I select 12434, I should fetch all the details of this particular enrollment number and display it in this form in a text box. And text box must be non-editable. So let us first create the GUI for the same. So I'm closing this execution now and moving to the code part on the design part of the form 2. So let me go to toolbox, put a label here. That label is going to have some underlines just to separate the code, the first part and the second part, nothing else. Again, I will take one more label. That label name will be your enrollment number, and I will take one text box. Again, I will copy paste these controls for 6 times because as per our record, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And as I want to have all the text box, I will just copy paste all these things. But before that, we have to do one exercise, that is this one. All text boxes must be non-editable. So I should not be able to write or edit any content of the text box. So what I will do is I will select this text box, press F4, open this property window and go to a property called enabled. If you see, by default enabled is true. That means you are able to edit anything in this particular text box. I will double click on this and make it false. So this text box is now non-editable. Okay, so moving on next, I'll just copy paste this, Control C, Control V, and I'll just change the text of this to, let us say, your name is. Again, copy paste. Again here, let me just keep it like this, your semester. Next is your email. Next is for mobile, your mobile. Next, let us say for date of birth, your birth date. And last is for gender. Your gender is, or your gender, let it be. So we have created 7 different text boxes to display the details of any enrollment number that has been selected in this combo box. Let me just execute this form first for one more time. Right, if you see here, all the text boxes are non-editable. That means you are not able to write anything in this text box. It is not clickable actually, right? So our first, second, third task is over actually, right? This task is over and we have completed the first task. So now we are dealing with the next task, that is this one. So I am just writing one query for your reference in this part. Let us say select star because I want to fetch everything from the database from student where enroll equals to, I am writing any of these enrollment numbers here. Let us say 1, 2, 4, 3, 4 and execute this query. So this query has been executed. See, I have written this query. I have specifically said that I want to fetch the data of all the data from the student table whose enrollment number is 12434. So specifically only one row has been fetched, but different columns have been fetched from the query. So one row, so index will be 0 and different rows, columns, sorry. So the index starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 likewise. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. So this query results only one row but multiple columns. So this is the output that we are expecting when we actually select any value from this particular combo box and based on that we fill up all these text box, right? So for that what we will do is I will generate an event of combo box. We are not dealing with the form to event now. We are going to deal with combo box event. So I'll double click on combo box. So automatically one event of combo box has been generated and that event says selected index changed. Now what do you mean by this particular event? It says that whatsoever values you put up in the combo box, that all values has some index in backend. The first value will have 0 index, second will have 1, likewise it will have n minus 1 index. So whatsoever index you are selecting, so automatically that value will be selected and based on that your functioning will be done. So selected index changed. So what we want to do here, and on selecting any of the index, we are going to fetch all the data from the database and we will put up in the individual text boxes. So I'm just minimizing this magnifier now. So I'm going to write the same query here again, right? Select star from student where enroll equals to 12434. But this query right now is a static query. And what we want is a dynamic query. That means whatever value has been selected in the combo box, that value must be, for that value, all the details must be fetched. So here I will write my query as string SEL equals to double quotes select star student where here we said enrollment equals to static value, right? So I'm going to write here enroll equals to, but now what we want to say, whatsoever value has been selected in this particular combo box, that value must be, for that value all the details must be fetched from the student table. So select star from student where enroll equals to double quotes plus plus and combo box 1 dot selected item. Because combo box contains integer data type values, we are not using single quotes here. Only double quotes 2 plus plus and combo box 1 dot selected item. That means select all the values from student table where enrollment equals to that value that has been selected in this combo box, right? Now the same thing, to execute this query again will require one data table. Data table dt again equals to new data table. To execute this query, we will use SQL data adapter DA equals to new SQL data adapter. It will take two arguments, your query as well as your connection string. Next task, fill the data table with the data adapter. So data table da.fill dt. So this task will be performed as this one. It will have one row and 8 different columns. Column ID, then column enroll, column name, column SAM, column email, column mobile, column DOB, and column gender. Index starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And row index starting with only 0 because only one row is there. So coming back to the code part, what we need to do now, we have selected all the data and stored it in this data table. Now using this data table, we are going to fill up all this text box. And to fill up all this text box, we need to remember the unique identification of all this text box. To know this, what we will do is, we will select the text box, we will see the ID is text box 1. Select second text box, it is text box 2. Third is text box 3, fourth text box 4, fifth text box 5, this text box 6 and text box 7. So it's all are in sequence. So there is no issue, right? It is possible whenever you are copy pasting any of the controls multiple times, it is possible that it may not be in a sequence. So always check first and then go for a code part. This is a suggestion, right? Okay, so moving on next, we have the sequence of the text box. First one is for enrollment, second is for name, third is for semester, fourth is email, fifth is mobile, sixth is birth date, and seventh is gender. So coming to the code part, again I will check whether my data table contains any rows or not. Is greater than 0. If dt.rows.count is greater than 0, that means if this select query has returned any records and that record has been filled in this particular data table, then and then execute this one, right? So if dt.rows.count is greater than 0, then we start filling up the data, and we need to fill up the data in this text box. So first one is text box 1. So text box 1 dot text equals to. Now what we need to fill? We need to fill the enrollment of the data, right? Enrollment number in this particular text box that we have fetched from our database. So I will write dt dot rows and again two square brackets. Now first square bracket is for row index, second is for column index, right? So row index is by default 0 because as we said here, there is only one row, right? So the row index will be 0 always. But what about the column index? If you see here, my enrollment number is here, but this query has fetched all the records, including the ID that we have not entered anytime, that was generated automatically. So if I see the index of ID is 0, index of enroll will be 1. So here we are going to write 1. And because text box always consider all the values as a string, we need to convert all the values, even though it is integer type, we need to convert it to string type at runtime. Because text box always takes all the values as a string. Though we have entered numbers here, it has to be converted to text or string type. So this is the direct way to convert it. So dot to string. Similarly, text box 2 is for name. So dt dot rows, again index of row will be 0 dot to string. Now what is the index of name? 0, 1 and 2. So it will be 2. Similarly, text box 3 dot text equals to dt dot rows dot to string, and we pass the index of row and column, that is 0 and 3, because now it is in sequence that we know, right? Semester is 3, email is 4, mobile is 5, DOB is 6 and gender is 7. So likewise we are just entering all this thing. Text box 4 dot text equals to dt dot rows dot to string, and we pass the index, that is 0 and 4. Text box 5 dot text equals to dt dot rows dot to string, a semicolon, pass the index of column and row. Text box 6 dot text equals to dt dot rows of to index dot to string, let us say 0 and 6. And last is text box 7 dot text equals to dt dot rows of dot to string, and we provide the index as 0 and 7. Right. So what we have done so far, we have selected the data from the student where specifically enrollment number that has been selected in the combo box. We have executed the query and filled all the data executed in the data table, and based on that we have tried to fill all the text box based on the index of this column and this row, 0 index of row and 0 to 7 index of column. Let us try to execute this form one more time and let's see whether it is working or not actually. So right now there is no data in the text box. We have not selected any enrollment number in this particular combo box. Let us try to fetch any of these. Let us say I am selecting 12434. So on selection of this, automatically the enrollment number has been fetched and displayed here. Name, semester, email, mobile, birth date and gender. Let us compare this data with our query that we executed here. I'm zooming it for you. See, we have not displayed ID here. We have displayed the enrollment number, Raj, semester, email, 87 and mobile number, date of birth and gender. Let me select any other enrollment number. Let us say 253453. See, automatically the data has been changed. Let us change it here, 253453 and execute. So if you see and compare, just a moment, students. Yeah, yeah. See, again, 253453, Hardi is 6, the email, mobile number, all is same. So our task is working properly. Whatsoever number you will select, it will fetch the details based on it and display in this text box. Right? Clear with this part? Yes. Any questions, students? It is just a safe side for this particular question, that why we are converting varchar to string if it's already in a string. If you do not convert, it's okay. There is no issue with it. But it's a safe side to convert whenever you are displaying any data from the database and displaying it in a text box. Clear, Hali? Is it clear, Hali? Okay. So I request you all to just go through these codes once more, right? And if you have any query, just raise it right now, and then we'll go for the next exercise. This is the first query that we have filled the combo box. And this is the second query where we have filled the values based on the combo box. So you first go with this first part, then we'll go for the next second one. Do you require to zoom it? I'll zoom for you. Once you are done reading, just provide 3 to 4 answers that yes, we are done with the first part. We'll move to second part. Okay, so we'll move to next part. Okay, so moving on to the next part, this is the combo box. See, database applications is all about playing with the queries. If you know, if you have a good hold over the queries, you can write any applications using the database. Okay, Parth, to create a form load event, you just need to go to your form, select your form and double click on this blue pane here near about your title of the form. It will automatically create your form to load event. Is it clear, Parth? Okay. So moving on to our next part again, just go through it. If any queries, raise it right now so you can solve it. Then you can go for next session. Yes, instead of changing from program.cs, Heli, can you just provide the complete question? See, this is the better way to change it from program.cs is the better way to execute your form. You can do this thing also, you can change it directly from your project also run form too, but maybe it may create some issues when you are building different forms into one single form. Then I will show you when we are starting with the MDI forms, maybe tomorrow or on Monday. Right, so shall we move on to the next session? That is the next task. Okay, so we are moving to the next task now. I'm minimizing everything now. So moving on to the next task. So I'm closing this SQL part. Design is okay. Program.cs okay. I'm closing this form now. Right. So we now just read out the next task. The next task is this. Create a GUI that displays all students' records in a tabular form. Also, what you need to do is in that's the same tabular form, you need to update student record or you should be able to insert a new record from the same table. Yes, I will surely share form 1 and form 2 today. I will upload this application in your e-content. Don't worry. I will message you once it's done. Fine. Okay. So my task is I need to create a GUI that displays all the student records in a tabular form. That means let us say again going back to the Server Explorer and executing a query like select star from student. And if I execute this query, I'm getting one tabular format. The same tabular format I want to show in my Windows form. And also what I want is I should be able to update any student records from this table that is being shown in this particular. If I double click on here and if I edit this text, it should be editable. I should also update in the database. Also, I should be able to insert a new row in the same table, right? So if I compare this task with your HTML, what you will do, you will write table tag, then tr and td tags, right? And you will generate the table as per the requirement provided by your faculty. So in .NET, we don't have such tags, right? We are not able to write any particular code for design part. We just need to use all the controls that has been provided by the Microsoft. So if I want to display a table in this particular application, what I will do, I will again go to Solution Explorer. Yeah, Solution Explorer. Right click on my application, new item, select Windows form, and I will just create one form. Now, this particular Windows Form application contains an inbuilt tool to create a table in your form. That tool will minimize this common controls, will go to data, and in this data, we have a controlled called data grid view. I will just drag and drop here and I will set it as per my GUI requirement. Let us say like this. Right now, this data grid view is an inbuilt control that creates a table automatically. But right now you cannot see anything. Even if I execute this particular form, let us say form 2, and I'm trying form 3 now. See, everything is empty. In backend, there is some table, but we are not able to see any table in the layout part or output layer, right? So now what you need to do is to show the data from this particular table, we need to show this data in this particular control. So we do not write any code for this. What we'll do is just simply bind this database with this control. Again, I'm repeating, we are not going to code for this. What we'll do is we will bind this database and the table of this database to this particular control. And to do this, what we'll do, we'll click on this black arrow, right? Here we have one drop down, choose data source. I will select this drop down and I will select this add project data source option. It is add project data source. That means what data you want to add to this particular control. So I'll click on this add project data source. So now it is asking me what you want to add. You want to add some XML service, you want to add some object, you want to add some external data from using SharePoint, or you want to add a database. Right now we are going to deal with the database. So click on next. So what you want to use? By default, it will use a data set. A data set is a collection of a data tables. So we are going to select this and move on to next part. Now here you need to just provide from which connection string or for which database you want to add a data to this control. So by default, our database is automatically selected by this particular module. So webinar.mdf and the connection string is this. Click on next. No need, if you want to save this connection string for the future use, you can click on this, else you can uncheck and go ahead. We are not dealing with this part. Go to next. This is the main window. Now whatsoever webinar.mdf file contains will be provided here. Right now your webinar.mdf file does not contain any views, any stored procedures, any functions. It contains one table. So all the tables that your webinar.mdf file contains will be displayed here. It contains only one table, and that table has this many rows. Now this provides you an option that which columns you want to display in this particular control. Right now I'm selecting all the columns. Starting from ID to gender, I'm selecting all the columns. Okay, I'll repeat these steps after I complete this process. Wait. Right now I'm selecting all the data, all the columns of this student table and click on finish. So automatically the column headings has been bounded by your control. Right? Whatever columns you selected in your this particular binding process, that has been displayed here. So again I'm repeating how to bind the data. First we take a data grid view control, then clicking on this black arrow, we'll click on add project data source. I'm right now removing this data source. Click on this black arrow, add project data source, click on database, click on data set. In the next, create a connection string to your database wherever it is. Let us say desktop, webinar 1, and this database file. If I click on OK, it will say, yes, it has been added. If you see connection string, it is here. Click on next. Now select the table that you want to display in your this data grid view. So I'm selecting this table and all the columns. Click on finish. So all the columns has been bounded in this particular grid view. Now if I click on this black arrow, there is some option here. Enable adding, enable editing, enable deleting. That means your user is allowed to add a new row here, is allowed to edit any of the rows here, and is allowed to delete any of the row from the database. First, I will execute this form now. On executing this form, I hope that it will fetch all the data from the database and fill it in this. See, so your table has automatically been generated and all the data has been fetched. Right? Now, the second task of this was I should be able to update student record or insert a new record. That means if I try to insert a new record here, right? Let us say I'm adding some data. I will write some name. I will write some semester. I will write some email ID. I will write some mobile number. I will add some date and I will add some this gender. If I tab it, a row has been generated here virtually. But if I check my database, if I if I go to my database and refresh it, because the application is running, it won't refresh automatically. Yes. So I'll just close this application and again try to refresh it. Just a moment, students. I'll just reopen it, refresh, and show table data. See, that row has not been generated. We had 6 rows and 6 rows are there in database. So on executing the application, the row has not been generated. So now we want to generate a new row in the database as well as here. We should be able to edit any values and reflect in the database. All the things should be done automatically. But nothing is automatic in this world. We need to write something that will do all the tasks for us. So what I'm doing is in my design part, I will create one button. So I'll minimize data and go to my command controls, take one button and put it here. And I'm renaming or texting it, renaming is text as update data. Right. So what I want to do is whatever changes I am making in this particular data grid view, either I insert a new row, update any particular row or delete any row. And if I click on this update data button, it should reflect all the changes in this particular table, right? So for that, we require 3 things. If you see, 3 things are generated here. One is webinar dataset 1. Second is student binding source and third is student table adapter. Now what these 3 controls are? The first one is the data set. That means what table you want to bind in this control. So we have said that we want to bind this table in this particular control. The second is student binding source. That means from where we should get this particular table. So in short, our connection string. The connection string is available here, this one. So we have provided the connection string from where you can get the data, store it in data set and display it in this data grid view. And the last one is student table data adapter or table adapter. That means this is a backend table that has been generated automatically by this control. So whenever you are using this control, automatically these 3 will be generated once you establish this particular part. That means add project data source and you follow all these steps and complete all these steps properly, right? So we are going to use these 3 options for this control also. So what we'll do, double click on this button and it will create a button click event. Now, if you see here form load event, that means whenever form is executed, what it does, this dot student table adapter, this means this part, this table adapter in the backend, I need to fill that adapter with webinar data set 1. That means the data set that has been generated automatically, and I want to fill it with student table, the table that contains in this data set. So this code was automatically generated by your .NET. Okay, I'll repeat all these steps again. What I want to do is I want to update, insert a data, update a data, or delete a record using one button click, and all those things must be reflected in this database. So for that, I have taken one button, and to do all such operations, I'll require three things. The first is data set. That data set will have the table that I want to display here. This is binding source, a connection string, and this is backend table generated by your grid view, right? And when you executed this form, this code was automatically created by your data grid view, which says that in a backend, the table should be filled with this data set that contains this particular table, that is student table. So same thing we are going to apply here. This dot student table adapter, but instead of fill, we are going to write update. Update what? This dot data set. That's it. We are not specifying table name here. We are just specifying the data set. It will automatically do whatever it wants to do in a backend. So this dot student table adapter in the backend, update it with this data set that is being shown on this screen. This is the code that we need to write. Let us try to execute the form and see whether it works or not. So this is the data. Let me change the name of this man to Manish. And if I click on this update data, or let me change the mobile number of this Hardi student to 1112222. Right, so I've changed the name of enrollment 14896 to Manish, and change the mobile number of Hardi to 115 times 2. Click on update data. Okay. Now let me close this and let us check our database. We'll go to database and click on refresh. It has not changed. Maybe there will be some issue. So we'll see what is this again. Let me try it again one more time. Let us say Manish again here, and mobile number as 1112222. Update data. Let us try to update this one more time. Okay, just a moment. So what is the error now? Error is whatever database this particular adapter has generated will be in your some different folder of your application. Let me show you. Let us say webinar 1. Webinar 1, it has created three folders: bin, debug, and that contains your webinar.mdf file. And the connection string that was used by this particular control was dynamic connection string. That means you try to search out this database anywhere in this particular application and try to fill this, but this won't work. So what we need to do is, we'll go to Solution Explorer. You can see app.config file here. Double click on it. So this file contains a dynamic connection string. So what we will do here is, we will generate our own string, this connection string, copy it and paste here. We'll remove connection timeout, it's not required. And save this file and close it. We'll try to execute one more time. Again, let us change the name. Manish, mobile number. Or let us say right now, update data, close this, refresh the database. See, the Manish has been changed and changed. Right, now again I'm executing this, just last 2 minutes. I'm trying to insert a new record. Let us say enrollment number, some name, some semester, some data, some mobile number, some date, and some particular gender. Update data, close this, try to refresh. If you see, automatically new row has been generated. Again executing this form, and we'll try to delete this record. So I select this row and press delete and click on update and close this, refresh. See, your 7th row has been removed. So this is the control which automatically does everything that you want to do as a database operations. Right, so these 2 tasks we have completed today. Right, any questions, raise it quickly, else I can switch over to Happy Madam for your next session of CD. Be quick to raise the questions, students. Any questions? How to connect all the forms, like, okay, you want data binding steps. Okay, so data binding steps are, again click on this control, go to black arrow, select add project data source, database, going back, database, click on next, data set, click on next, provide the connection string of your database using the browse option, then go to next, select the table that you want to display, all the columns or few columns, and click on finish. It will automatically bind your data. Yes, any more? No, this is not possible that if I click on some button, it will direct to some other form. It is possible, we will use it in the next application. So I'll show you there how to redirect to some other form on clicking some other but some button actually. This is the black arrow, Heli, see here on the top of that particular control. Is it visible now? Say zoom it. See this. Is it, Heli? Okay. I will show you in the next session again how I created this table. Don't worry. Now right now I am switching over to Heli ma'am. Right? Thank you guys for the day. Have a nice day.
Hello everyone, am I audible? Hello, good afternoon everyone. Am I audible? Good afternoon everyone. Let's start with the new session which is related with your compiler design subject as well as the code optimization piece. Okay, in our last session, we have completed up till the intermediate code generation technique, right? So before we start with the code optimization, let's revise some points and some pieces of compiler that we can easily understand that where our code optimization piece is placed in our compiler, what is the actual role of our code optimization piece, and what is the actual work of our code optimization piece. So let's start with the first phase, that is our lexical analyzer. As we discussed in our earlier session, that lexical phase will convert our code into the tokens. And what is the tokens? Token is nothing but the small entity of our program. And if we will say that what is entity, then the list of our operators, list of our operands, list of our delimiters, and all these things are comes under the tokens. So say for example, if I'll say that my string is z is equals to a plus b, then the first phase will convert your example into the identifier 1 is equals to the identifier 2 add with the identifier 3. This is the output of our first phase. Now switch to the second phase, that what is the work of our syntax analyzer phase. Now the syntax analyzer phase will convert your code into the syntax tree as well as the parse tree. Now what is the difference between the syntax tree and parse tree? Don't worry, I'll not discuss over here because so many times we were discussed it in our sessions, right? So just overview that syntax trees always contain the root node or intermediate node as an operator and the leaf node as a operand. So if we considered our example, then the root nodes are always the equal to and the if I have a three identifiers in the float variable and I want to store my three float type variables into the integer type as a result, then the float is converted into the integer. Now, so type conversion is there in the output of our semantic analyzer phase. Now, the fourth number phase, that is the intermediate code generation phase. So all we are aware with that, what is the major task of our intermediate code generation phase. Now it will generate the intermediate code. Then why we require intermediate code? Because if we don't have any intermediate code for the given language processor, then we can never generate the code optimization as well as the target code for the given example or the given program. So the if we'll see that the example z equals to a plus b, then as we were discussed in our session that intermediate code has a different phases, different forms. Now first form is a type of tree address code generation. Second form is a type of syntax tree, um, syntax directed definition tree, and the third form that is known as the postfix notation. So here we will discuss that what is the three address code for the given example. Now the three address code for given example is the major concern is our A plus B. So now first of all we'll store our answer into the temporary variable 1, the addition of A plus B. Now the if we'll write that T2 equals to T1, that is a totally T2 equals to T1. This is totally wrong definition. Why? Because I want to store the answer in a Z variable. So the as a resultant value, I have a Z in a left hand side, and I can store the answer of T1 into the Z. So ultimately, if I want to use my Z equals to A plus B over here, then I have to use the fifth number phase, that is a code optimization phase. Now, the I think you all are aware with that what is the major task of our code optimization phase. Now, what is the major task of code optimization phase? That is nothing but we just need to convert our code into the efficient code. Now, what is the efficient code? If we don't have any intermediate code, then we can never generate the optimized code. So in terms of optimization code and in terms of the efficiency, we just need to reduce the size of our memory storage, reduce the time complexity. That all the things that comes under the optimization phase. Now if we are in the optimization phase, then we are in the major phase, that is the backend. So there is no any requirement of our source code. It is directly connected with our target code. So I think you all are aware with that how many phases will come under the front end and how many phases will come under the back end. So if we'll discuss that how many phases will come under the front end, that means the major phases which are directly concerned with, or which phases are directly communicated with the our front end, that sorry, source code, that then their all phases comes under the front end. And if my all phases are directly connected with our target code, that many phases are comes under the backend. So if we are in the code optimization phase, that means we are under the backend processes. Now if we are under the backend, then our compiler can optimize the code by itself. Now first time we run our code, then optimizer our compiler never understand that how to optimize my code. Then second time it will compile your code, then third time, then it will identify that this many lines is unnecessarily used in my program. If I'll delete or if I'll eliminate this number of lines from my given code, then I can optimize the code efficiently. So I think you all are aware with what is the optimization and why we require the code optimization phase in our compiler. So now the major task is what is the actual organization of our code optimization phase. So as we were discussed that what is the front end, what is the code generation phase, and in between we have a code optimization phase. Now what is the major task and how your code can be optimized using which methodologies. Now the first one is a control flow analysis. Now what is a control flow analysis? Now, as the name suggests, there is some analysis. Now, which type of analysis are there? So, first one, we will say that if, let's say, the example of our C language, example, or we can say the program of C language. Now, if I have one function, and your one function can call the function number 2. Now, your function number 2 can call the function number 3, right? So when a function 1 can call function 2, I think it may be possible it will contain some variable answer, that is integer a and integer b, right? So the value of integer a and the value of integer b return the addition the value like integer. Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible or not? Hello, okay. So, am I audible now? Yes, I am audible. Okay. So in between there is an issue regarding this mic, then please write down in the comment section or in question section so that I can identify that am I audible or not. Okay, sorry for the inconvenience. Now, so we go over here that the flow and a control flow analysis. How your flow can be generated from one function to the another function, from another function to the function number 3. So if slowly we can analyze that function 1 can pass the value to function 2 and function 2 can pass the value to function 3. So in between, if the function 2 will return some integer value, then we need to identify that that integer value must be passed to the our next function, right? So that type of analysis are there in your control flow analysis. Now the second phase under the code optimization process, that is a data flow analysis. Now, what is the work of data flow analysis? Now, as we have discussed that if I'll assign some value to A and if I'll assign some value to the B. So the addition of A plus B must be returned to the function 1 as the integer type function 1. Okay, something like this, right? Yes. So the data of variable A, the data of variable B must be passed from or returned from function 1 when we call that function and when we call back from that function. So which data must be stored into the symbol table, which type of variable we need for the further process and which type of location we require in the further process, that all the processes or that all type of variables as well as function must be stored into the symbol table so that we can directly access that location or access that variables from the R symbol table for the further process. Now the third, that is the transformation. After completion of control flow analysis, after completion of data flow analysis, we can convert or we can transform our whole tree address code into the code optimized code. Now, the optimized code is the input of our code generation phase. Now, how many levels of optimization are there? So first level is the design level, second one is compile level, and the third one is the assembly level. So as we discussed that what is a design level, then the first phase of our compiler that is directly connected with our source code, that is a design level phase. So we can say that this is the highest level optimization phase. So how many resources will we want in a future, how the algorithm may be efficient or not, that type of optimization are there in your design level section. Now the second level is our compile level. Now the actual work or the middle work that we can say that the major concern of our side, that is the compile level, that if we want to compile our code, then how many data can be optimized and how much block is unnecessary from my code can be deleted, that all things are identified and predicted by our compiler at the compile level. And the last one, that is the assembly level. So as we have discussed that assembly level code is the lower level code and it is directly understandable by our machine. So as we have discussed that 8085 code, 8084 microprocessor code is comes under the assembly level code. So it must be efficient code so that our next phase or machine understandable code must be a perfect code. Now, for that we have different types of techniques to optimize dead code elimination, algebraic simplification, strength reduction, and a loop optimization. So before we'll start with the technique, just let me know that is there any question regarding the optimization process? You can ask me the question so that I can identify that we'll move for the further process. Okay, students, is there any question? Yes, Heli. Yes, we can say that synthesis phases are back-end process. Yes, synthesis phases are back-end process, but if we will see that code optimization phase, then our code optimization phases also comes under the synthesis as well as the back-end phase. I think I'm clear with your question. Heli, is it okay? Is there any numericals from this topic? Yes, I'll discuss it later. Meet, you just wait for that. So analysis are front end. Yes, you can say that analysis phases are comes under the front end because it is directly connected with your source code. Okay, I think I'm clear with your question. Optimization techniques, ma'am, where memory management comes in. And you don't know that have to optimize the code, and you'll write something like your value multiplied with 1, then that number of line is not needed or not required in your code, so that you can eliminate that number of lines from your code. So that type of memory can be reused by some another processes. Okay, Heli. Okay, let's move further with the code optimization technique. So I think you anyone has any doubt? Okay, so let's start with the code optimization techniques. Though the first technique, that is the compile time evaluation. So what is the compile time evaluation technique? It will contain a measure two methodologies, that is the folding methodology as well as the second one is constant propagation technique. Now, what is the folding method and what is the constant propagation? Before we proceed with that processes, let's see that what is the compile time evaluation. We just shift our computation from runtime to the compile time. Let's say, for example, if I'll say that for the say for example, if I require that answer is equals to 22 by 7 multiplied with d, right? So as we compile our code, so at the runtime the answer of 22 divided by 7 is something like our pi value is 3.14. So instead of runtime, our compiler can compile the value of 22 by 7 at the compile time process, right? So instead of runtime, we will compute our code into the compile time processes. So for that, first one, we have a folding methodologies. So as we were discussed in our previous example, that 22 by 7 multiplied with d, instead of the runtime, it will give the computation of 22 by 7 and replace the value, that is answer equals to 3.14 multiplied with the d at the compile time, right? This type of conversion or this type of optimization is done at the compile time, so that we can say that it is optimized code. A time is saved, some type of memory is saved, because the 22 by 7, if we want to continue with 22 by 7 at the runtime, then the time is wasted at that time. So compiler understand that 22 by 7 is the answer something like 3.14. So it can replace 22 by 7 with 3.14 and then multiplied with the d at the compile time level, right? Yes. Now the second methodology, that is constant propagation methodology. Now what is a constant propagation methodology? So as our example over here, that a is assigned some value, that is a equals to 0. So 0 is my constant value and it will never change in my program for the first line. B equals to a plus 1. So at the runtime, my a can be replaced with 0. But our compiler assign the values to your variable, right? So it will be done by the compile time as well as done by the compiler, right? Is there any question? Okay, let's say one more example of your constant propagation. So if I have some value, that is a equals to pi, a equals to 3.14 and b equals to 5, right? And my equation is something like answer is equals to a multiplied with b multiplied with b, right? So instead of this process, our compiler directly convert our code into 3.14 multiplied with 5 multiplied with 5, right? So instead of the variable name, it can directly assign the constant value to your variable. Yes. Now, the second method, that is a common sub-expression elimination method. Now, what is the common sub-expression elimination? Now, as the name suggests, that if we have some type of expression or some type of expressions which is repeatedly one or more times in our program. Hello, am I audible now? Hello. Okay. Okay, for I'm audible, right? Okay. So the second one, that is common sub expression. So it is something like eliminate a one expression which is already there in your program before some execution, right? Or before some expression. So let's say one example, that is the three address code generation technique, that T1 equals to 4 into I, T2 equals to A of T1, T3 equals to 4 multiplied by J, and T4 equals to 4 into I. So in a given example, T1 equals to 4 into I as well as T4 equals to 4 into I, as well as our T1 is never be used with some another expressions or with some another operations, right? So if I'll remove the T4 equals to 4 into I from my given code, so there is no any issue for the program. So as well as our optimized code is not affect our output as well as the input. Okay, so yes, we can delete the T4 equals to 4 into I, right? So your compiler can eliminate T4 equals to 4 into I, as our T4 is not used in the further program, as well as my T1 is not used in the next further operations, right? So let's say one more example of that my code is something like the same example of common sub expression technique, right? Expression. The T1 is equals to temporary variable 1 can store the value of A multiplied with 7. T2 is equals to something like A plus B. T3 is equals to Z plus X. T4 is equals to A minus I. T5, or we can change it something like minus T2. Right? You can take any example. And T5 equals to A multiplied with 7. Instead of this A, that will replace with R, and over here also replace with R. So you cannot confuse over there, right? Now, if as we discussed, okay, let's say one more T6, that is something like F minus P, right? Or you can say F minus T3. Okay. So out of this whole code, my T1 equals to A multiplied with 7 and T5 equals to A multiplied with 7 as a repeated sub expression. So if I remove T5 equals to A minus 7 out of my code, then I don't have any hurdles in my code, right? So whenever the compiler requires that type of sub-expression elimination process, then it can directly remove your code. Okay. Up till now, is there any doubt? The common sub-expression method, as well as our previous section, that is a compile time evaluation process, folding constant propagation and common sub-expression elimination process. Up till now, is there any doubt? Just replay me so that I can move further with the another process or another technique. Okay, I think no, ma'am. Okay, move on. Okay, so let's move further with the one more technique. That is the copy propagation method. Now, what is the copy propagation method? Sometimes we don't know that we have two variables and we assign that variable's value to the one more variable, but without any operation, right? Something like A equals to B, then F equals to I plus A, and K equals to 9 plus G, something like this. So there is no any use of B equals to A. If simply I'll assign A I plus B, then also I can directly access the A variable. Why? Because I'll not do any further operations with my A, right? So simply if I will replace my A with B and remove this A equals to B, then I can directly run the same code without any hurdle, right? So something like example. Yes. So A equals to E. I'll assign that E variables can store into the A, then B equals to A plus 1. C equals to C plus B, and A equals to 2 multiplied with B, right? So A equals to E and B equals to E plus 1. So I can directly replace my this A with the E variable, and C equals to C plus B. Why? Because I don't want to change anything from my code, right? So the next method, that is code motion. Now what is a code motion? Sometimes we have using the loops, for loop, uh, while loop, do while loop, right? In that type of loops, some unnecessary sections or some unnecessary sentences are there in our for loop, which is not required to uh, write that code into the code in under the for loop. So if I eliminate that code, that number of expression or that number of code from my for loop to the out of my loop, then there is no any change in my program. Okay, so if you have doubt, then just ask me. Atul Kumar, sub expression. Now, what is there any problem in a sub expression? Atul, what if we are modifying one copy and we need original copy as well? So, in that type, okay, Haley. Okay, in that type of problem, your compiler never do that thing. If we want to do some operation in my original variable, then your compiler never change that value. But if I don't want that variable and unnecessary, I'll assign that value or copy that value to another variable and use that another variable in my code. So there is no any meaning of that type of question. Right, Hali? Am I clear with your question? If you want both the copy of your variable and you want some if you want to do some operation in that original variable as well as duplicate, then your compiler never do that thing. If we just want to copy that the value of A into E, at that time your compiler can do that number of processes. Permanently delete from memory, yes, it will permanently delete at the compile time level, right? It will not permanently delete from your code, right? This is the backend process, so that your compiler can identify by itself that if this number of line can I delete from my program, then my program is not a bit problematic when my output is that. If it will permanently delete it from your memory, then the original code is also problematic. Right? So at the compile time, it will hide your code or maybe eliminate the code. Okay. So let's start with the code motion. Now, it will nothing but the moving some amount of code out of your loop. So this type of processes is also known as the loop and invariant, right? So which is irrelevant with my for loop, then I can easily remove or delete that code from my program. Okay, so discuss this code. T equals to 2, I'll assign a value T2 to the T variable. Now for loop, I equals to 0, I is less than n, and I plus plus. So first time A equals to T into 10, B equals to 20 multiplied with I, and Y plus is equals to A multiplied with B. So at the compile time process, it will check that if I delete A equals to T multiplied by 10 out of my for loop, then there is no any change in my code. Why? Because it is totally irrelevant with your code, right? So irrelevant means there is no any use of I as well as there is no any use of n. So if there is any use of I and capital N in my given code, or if I want to do some operations using I and N, at that time I have to put my code inside in the code loop. But here I don't have any requirement of I and N in my for loop, so that I can easily remove or I can easily eliminate that code from my for loop and put it into the outside of my for loop, right? So if we want some another example, I'll take one more example of code motion technique. Okay, so the first example, I'll write some code, something like a equals to 200. I'll do while, yes, let's some while. While if my a is greater than 0, so that condition is correct. A is greater than 0. B equals to x plus y. X plus y contains some values. Then one more condition in my for loop, that if my A is modulus with B, produce the output as a 0 value, then uh, print the value of A, right? And complete the while, right? So students, let's give me the answer that which sentence I need to remove from my while loop, then also my code is perfectly run, as well as it will not disturb your output as well at the running time process. Okay, everyone, just answer the question that which type of sentence I need to eliminate from my while loop, and if I'll eliminate that sentence out of my while loop, then also my program is correct as well as run the perfectly. Okay, which statement, okay student, give me the answer which statement if I'll remove from my while loop, then also my code is perfectly run without any hurdles of the output. Am I audible? Hello student, am I audible? Just say yes or no. It's okay if you don't want to give me the answer of that question. Just answer me that am I audible or not. Okay, Helly, you can give me the answer. Okay, a small hint. I'll use the a variable in my while loop. So if I'll use the a variable in my for loop, then I can, okay, very good. So Nildeep Rathod, b equals to x plus y, very good. B equals to x plus y, Haley, very good. Purely breaks of it loop. Krishnaraj Singh, b equals to x plus y, very good. Okay, okay. Very good students. That is the correct answer. If I'll remove this line out of my while loop, then there is no any problem. Why? Because I'll not do any operation with my A in this line. Okay. Good. Now let's move further with the one more technique, that is the reduction in strength. Now, okay, recall some the precedence to the operator, right? Recall some value that operator precedence parsing. So the okay, I'll not ask the question, just recall it, okay? So don't be panic for that. So the strength of my higher variable or the higher precedence operators is always something like multiplication is the highest precedence than the plus precedence, right? So if I'll say that plus having the higher precedence than plus, in that case, the strength of my star is always higher than the strength of my plus, right? As well as if I'll say the percentage is always a greater than plus, right? Having the greater precedence than my plus variable. So you can say that the strength of modulus sign or modulus operator is always higher than the plus operator, right? Something like if I'll say that division having the higher precedence than my sign minus sign, right? So in that case, you can also say that a division strength is always higher than the minus operations strength, right? So in that case, a compiler needs more time for the higher precedence or the high strength value than the lower strengthable value, right? So in that case, if it will possible, there is possible that if I can replace my multiplication value with the plus sign, then it will always eliminate or it will convert or transform your code into the lower strength variable, right? So instead of using the star, if you can use a plus over there, then the time required is for that line or for that expression is always lesser than the multiplication process, right? So say for example, if I'll write that integer j equals to 0 for the for loop process, integer I equals to 1, I less than 10 and I plus plus, right? In for loop, I want to write j equals to I multiplied with some value that is 4, let's say, then print the value of j and complete the for loop, right? For this given for loop, if we want to run that for loop, the value of I is equals to 1 for the first time. So 1 multiplied with 4, the answer will be stored into the j variable, right? So right now the value of j is 0. So now a multiplied with, 1 multiplied with 4, answer is always 4. So first time the answer is 4. Now I is incremented with 1. So ith value is 2. So 2 multiplied with 4. So the answer is always 8, right? Then 8, then the I incremented with 1, the ith value is always with the 3. Sorry. So 3 multiplied with 4. So the answer is 12 up to the 10 times. Okay. So now if I want to replace this statement with the lower strengthable values, then I have one option. The option is something like if I delete this line and if I replace the value something like j equals to j plus 4, can I say that this number of lines always work same like j equals to I multiplied with 4? Yes or no? Let's run this line. Okay. So first time the jth value is always 0. So over here 0 plus 4. So the answer will be stored into the j. So first time the output of this line is 4. Second time I is incremented with 1. So the second time if my for loop will run, then the value of j is always 4. Why? Because we'll store the answer into the j only. So the 4 plus 4, the answer of the resultant value is stored into the j. So now the second time my jth value is 8, right? So third time if I'll run my for loop, then I equals to 3, right? So the 8 plus 4, so over here j will be replaced with the 8. 8 plus 4, the answer is the j equals to the 12, right? So we can replace our higher strengthable variable to the lower strengthable operator, right? So up till now, I think all are clear with the okay, students, up till now, am I clear with the, all processes, all or techniques? Then we'll move for further within one more technique. Okay, so let's move further with the next technique. That is the dead code elimination. Now, what is a dead code elimination? So, as we were know that some lines of code will never affect in our given code. That if we multiplied some value with the 1, if we assign some value that a equals to 10, and the next line will write that if my a equal 1, then run this next program or further program. So at that time you can say that there is a something like a dead code elimination. Okay, something like a equals to 10. In the next line, if my a is equal 1, then I need to perform a value something like some lines of code is that something like starting with the first line to the 10 line. Okay, so I think there is a no any line will be run at the runtime. Why? Because my a is always 10, so 10 will never equal with the 1 value, right? So that number of code and that number of memory as well as the symbol tables value is wasted for that time, for that program, particular program, right? So we can say that this whole code is a dead code for the given program. So if we'll assign a value equal to 10 and it will irrelevant with my next further code, then this number of lines will never execute in my program, right? So this is known as the dead code elimination process, right? So j equals to 100. If j equal 1 and x equals to a plus 5, print the value of x, right? So this number of lines will never execute in my program or in my compiler, right? So I think we will stop over here. And if you have any doubt in this session, then just ask me. You have 2 to 3 minutes for that, no doubt. What is the advantage of reduction? Okay, so the advantage of a reduction process is something like the memory is reusable by another program. The symbol tables memory is also reusable by another program. Please upload this PPT. Yes, I'll upload this once I'll complete with the session. Okay, so I'll stop over here. Stay safe and stay at home, your home, and enjoy the online sessions. Okay, I think you don't have any doubt in this session. Okay, for the next sessions, we'll inform you in your group. Okay. It is a time saving also. It is a memory usable thing also.